Forget everything you thought you knew about ancient Rome. Forget the marble columns, the noble senators, the epic gladiator battles. Because right now, we're diving into the steamy, sweaty, and shockingly honest underbelly of Pompeii. Imagine a city where the GPS wasn't an app, but a giant stone carving of a penis, proudly pointing you towards your next transaction. This is the story of the Lupanar, Pompeii's most infamous brothel, a place where desire was as organized as a Roman road, and the customer reviews were carved right into the walls. This isn't a history lesson. This is a backstage pass to the world's oldest, most brutally efficient pleasure factory. Your journey starts on the street. You're a Roman merchant, maybe a bit tipsy, maybe just bored. You've got a few coins jingling in your pocket, and you feel that familiar, restless itch. So you do what any self-respecting citizen of Pompeii did. You follow the arrow, not a metaphorical one. A literal, 3-foot-tall, carved stone penis embedded in the cobblestones, unambiguously directing foot traffic. Subtle, not even a little. Effective? Absolutely. The city planners treated brothels like bakeries or bathhouses, essential public services that needed clear signage. If you couldn't find it, you probably didn't deserve it. You turned down a narrow alley. The noise of the market fades, replaced by hushed negotiations and the occasional, unmistakable giggle. Cats weave between your feet. They're always here. You reach a modest, 2-story building. Above the door, another carving. This one's enthusiastic. It's not an invitation. It's a promise and a warning. You're about to step into a place where Roman decorum takes a very long lunch break. A breeze carries the scent of cheap wine, sweat, and something floral, maybe lavender, maybe regret. Another man stumbles out, adjusting his tunic with the dazed look of someone who either had the time of his life or forgot where he left his sandals. Welcome to the Lupanar. This isn't for Rome's elite. This is workers' paradise. Direct, practical, and built for one thing: throughput. Step inside, and the first thing that hits you isn't the decor. It's the sheer, unapologetic efficiency. There's no receptionist, no mood lighting, no soft music. Just a tight, stone corridor and the immediate, sinking realization that this place was designed for speed, not seduction. 10 rooms. That's it. 10 tiny cells, each barely bigger than a modern-day closet. In the center of each, a stone slab. That's your bed. Romantic? Only if you find park benches arousing. Customers were expected to bring their own comfort, a straw mat if you were lucky, a blanket if you were fancy. Forget privacy. Most rooms had no doors, just flimsy curtains. The thin stone walls meant you heard everything: the grunts, the coins clinking, the awkward apologies. It was a shared, communal experience in the most mortifying way possible. This wasn't a place to linger. It was a Roman vending machine for intimacy. Drop your coin, make your selection, and hope you don't run into your cousin on the way out. The whole operation was a marvel of ancient logistics, turning human desire into a brisk assembly line business. But how did you even know what to order? You didn't need a waiter. The menu was painted right above your head. Forget paper menus. Forget whispered requests. In the Lupanar, you simply looked up. Lining the corridors, above every single door, were frescoes. Hand-painted, full-color advertisements for the services available. And by services, we mean they left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Think of them as the ancient world's most graphic Yelp reviews, painted by someone with zero chill. These weren't for ambiance. They were instruction manuals. One fresco might show a couple in a gravity-defying pose. Another might feature a woman with her foot planted firmly on a man's chest, a service, or a very niche sport. Scholars still debate it. The point was, in a city where literacy was a luxury but libido was universal, pictures got the message across faster than any words. You'd glance up, point to fresco number 3, hand over your coin, and get gently ushered into your stone cell. The whole thing was transactionally unambiguous. No awkward small talk, no negotiating. Just point, pay, and proceed. And here's the kicker. This wasn't for the rich. Wealthy Romans had private courtesans. This place? This was for the bricklayers, the fishermen, the guys who just wanted 15 minutes of forgetfulness before dinner. For them, these wall paintings weren't just ads. They were promises, dreams in faded red ochre. And like all good dreams, they were slightly out of reach, depending on your budget. But the customers didn't just leave their money. They left their mark, permanently. The walls of the Lupanar are its true masterpiece. Forget the frescoes. The real goldmine is the graffiti. This place wasn't just a brothel. It was ancient Rome's most active, most unfiltered comment section. Step into any room, and you're surrounded by centuries of lust, ego, and questionable spelling, all carved into the plaster by clients with a stylus and too much wine. Some notes are brief and to the point. I screwed here. No date, no context. Just pure, unadulterated vibes. Others are oddly poetic. Gaz loves Daphne, but she prefers it with Marcus. Ouch, Gaz. That one stings. There are even what look like ratings. Thrusting is tiresome. Short, brutally honest, and possibly the world's first one-star review. Archaeologists have spent decades translating this stuff, often while trying not to laugh out loud. Some inscriptions are scratched so deeply, you know the writer meant every single word. Others are faint, like someone had second thoughts mid-carve, maybe after remembering their wife also reads Latin. It's easy to forget, looking at these walls, that these weren't just reviews. They were human fingerprints. The Lupanar wasn't a den of passion. It was a workplace, a marketplace, and a message board, all rolled into one. Every scribble, every complaint, is a tiny, vivid snapshot of real people, living, breathing, and getting busy in a city that was about to be wiped off the map. But behind the laughter and the lewd art, there was a dark, brutal reality for the people who actually worked here. Let's be brutally clear. The women, and some men, working in the Lupanar weren't there by choice. They weren't courtesans chasing fame or fortune. Most of them were enslaved, owned. Their names, the ones we find scratched on the walls or in wax tablets, read like cruel jokes. Fortunata, the lucky one. Felix, the happy one. Successa, the successful one. It's like naming your pet rock Usain Bolt and hoping for a miracle. The reality was anything but lucky. These women came from all over the empire, Gaul, Greece, Egypt, ripped from their homes and forced into a life of relentless, degrading labor. They didn't share a language, but they shared a job title and a daily routine that involved stone beds and strangers. They were managed by a lino, basically a glorified landlord who pocketed all the profits. The workers, they collected clients. If a woman was lucky, and by that, we mean in the bleakest Roman sense. She might eventually scrape together enough savings to buy her freedom. This took years of endurance and clients who paid in actual cash, not empty promises. Occasionally, a freed woman might go into business for herself, becoming a meretrix. She'd even wear a special stola to show she was no longer enslaved. Because nothing screams liberation like uncomfortable formal wear and paperwork. So, you've pointed at your preferred fresco, handed over your coin, and been guided into your dim stone cell. What was the actual experience like? Spoiler, it was fast, it was loud, and it definitely wasn't romantic. You're not here for a long time. And let's be honest, you're probably not here for a good time either. Everything in the Lupanar was built for one thing: speed. These weren't luxurious suites. They were cramped stone cells, barely large enough for 2 people, a flickering oil lamp, and whatever dignity you walked in with. Spoiler, it probably didn't walk out with you. The stone beds? They were raised slabs, like altars to fleeting pleasure. If you were lucky, there was a thin mattress. If you were less lucky, you got straw. If you were really out of luck, you got to contemplate the meaning of life on bare, volcanic rock. The average visit lasted about as long as it takes to unwrap a piece of cheese. Seriously, Roman graffiti literally mocks clients who took too long. The goal wasn't to woo, it was to move. Fast in, fast out. Next customer, please. This wasn't about romance. This was about plumbing the depths of desire with all the grace of a cattle stampede. Privacy? Minimal. Doors were often just curtains. The walls were thin enough that you could hear your neighbor's review in real time. And yet, people kept coming back. Maybe it was the thrill. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe the stone beds just gave excellent lumbar support. Who's to say? One thing's for sure, the whole place was a machine. An ancient Roman vending machine for intimacy. Drop in a coin, make your selection, and hope you don't run into your cousin on the way out. And yet, despite the rushed mechanics, there was something strangely, undeniably human about it. Even if that humanity was wrapped in linen, sarcasm, and the constant sound of someone fumbling with their toga. But what if you had a few extra coins jingling in your pocket? What if you wanted to upgrade from the stone slab special? If the ground floor was the Roman equivalent of a fast food drive-through, the upper floor was the slightly nicer sit-down restaurant, maybe, accessed by a narrow, probably treacherous stone staircase. The second floor offered something the ground floor couldn't: a bit of quiet, a bit of privacy, maybe even a cushion. This was where the slightly wealthier clientele went, the guys who had a few more coins and maybe expected their chosen companion to know a little Greek. The encounters here might have lasted a bit longer. The atmosphere might have been a bit less frantic. It's also believed that this upper floor served as living quarters for some of the workers. A place to collapse after a long shift, away from the constant churn of the ground floor. Archaeologists even found a latrine up here, which, depending on your perspective, counts as either a luxury feature or just a grim necessity. The 2-story structure also served as brilliant advertising. The painted signs outside were clearly visible from the street. With the right lighting and a hint of incense drifting out, the brothel almost seemed inviting from a distance. Visiting the Lupanar wasn't a silent, introspective experience. It was more like trying to have a very personal moment in the middle of a fish market. Pompeii was a noisy city. Streets bustled with vendors, blacksmiths pounded metal, and drunken citizens yelled odes to Venus. If you were trying to sneak in unnoticed, good luck. The clatter of your sandals announced your arrival to half the neighborhood. Once inside, the thin walls meant every sigh, grunt, and groan echoed from room to room. If you were shy, you left that at the door, or drowned it in cheap wine. Sometimes, wealthier clients upstairs would have a better auditory vantage point and enjoy the free entertainment unfolding below. It was a sensory overload, a Roman symphony of commerce and carnality. You might think a place like this operated in the shadows, constantly raided by toga-clad vice squads. But no, in ancient Pompeii, sex work wasn't just tolerated. It was regulated, officially. To be a professional, you needed to be registered with the Roman tax system. That's right. The empire always got its cut, even from the oldest profession. Brothels like the Lupanar operated openly, their locations no secret. Shutting it down would have meant shutting down half the taverns and bathhouses in the city. But don't mistake legality for dignity. Sex workers were considered infames, a legal category with almost no rights. They couldn't testify in court, own property, or marry respectable citizens. You could sleep with them, but heaven forbid you respect them. Disputes were handled by the brothel owner, not the courts. Legal protections, decorative at best. There were laws against abuse, but only if the worker was registered and the abuse interfered with her ability to work. Yes, the Roman version of workers' comp. Even the moralists of the time, like Juvenal, didn't rage against the brothels themselves. They raged against respectable men getting caught sneaking out of them. The sin wasn't the place. It was the senator caught leaving it. And if you think religion and brothels didn't mix, think again. The gods were practically on staff. Religion and the Lupanar weren't oil and water. They were more like wine and cheap incense. The goddess Venus, patron deity of Pompeii, and, well, love was everywhere. Her image adorned walls and shrines, watching over your performance with a serene, slightly unsettling gaze. Workers might pray before their shift, not for better working conditions, but for more clients or generous tips. Offerings to Venus or to Priapus, the god of fertility, usually depicted with, let's say, an intimidatingly large attribute, weren't uncommon. His presence, often carved on walls or garden statues, was meant to ward off evil and bring good luck. It was protection and branding, all in one. Roman religion wasn't bothered by sex itself. It was particular about who touched what and when. Visiting a brothel didn't make you impure. Wandering into a temple afterward without washing? That's when the gods might get annoyed. Not about your activities, but about your hygiene. The Lupanar had seen its share of drama, drunken brawls, and awkward exits. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared it for the morning of August 24th, 79 CE. It started subtly, a distant rumble, a puff of smoke on the horizon. Patrons probably assumed it was a rowdy tavern party or some overzealous street theater. After all, what better place to ignore ominous signs than a city where the walls were literally moaning? But then, the sky turned black at noon. Birds stopped singing. Dogs howled. Ash began to fall like morbid confetti. Inside the Lupanar, business ground to a halt. Not because of a sudden attack of morals, but because volcanic pebbles started raining down on the roof. Conversations turned from pricing to pure, unadulterated panic. That sultry moaning in the background? Now it was just someone screaming, "Run!" The brothel's sturdy but cramped architecture was no match for Vesuvius's fury. Superheated gas and debris swept through the streets at over 100 miles per hour. It wasn't the fire that got most people. It was the heat. Instant, invisible, inescapable. What's haunting is what was left behind. In the ruins, archaeologists found bodies curled in corners, slumped on. Stairs caught mid-flight. People didn't make it out. Some hesitated to grab their money pouch. Others thought, how bad could it be? Famous last thoughts. When the ash settled, Pompeii was preserved in eerie, perfect detail. Graffiti frozen mid-insult, food still on plates, and in the Lupanar, stone beds. Erotic frescoes, the ghost of human desire. All entombed under 20 feet of volcanic tantrum. Ironically, it was this disaster that gave us our clearest, most unfiltered glimpse into ancient Roman life. Without the eruption, the brothel would have decayed. Instead, it became a museum of sin, commerce, and raw, unvarnished humanity, as if the gods said, "Let's save this one." For educational purposes, when the Lupanar was unearthed in the 1860s, the reactions were mixed. Scholars were thrilled to find a perfectly preserved Roman building. Victorian-era excavators, they were clutching their pearls. Every wall was basically a stone carved OnlyFans page. The frescoes were unapologetically graphic. The graffiti was equal parts crude and clever. The stone beds were small, narrow, and about as romantic as a dentist's chair. Early excavators didn't know what to do with it. Some pieces were hidden away in Naples' secret cabinet, a locked vault for NSFW ancient art, viewable only by serious scholars. Wink, wink. Academics argued, was this anthropology or smut? Were the frescoes symbolic or instructional? And most importantly, how do we explain this to the school groups? Despite the awkwardness, the Lupanar became one of Pompeii's most visited sites. Not because tourists were perverts, though let's not rule that out, but because it told a story unfiltered by myth or marble. This was real Roman life on the margins, now front and center. It showed us the class divides, the brutal economics, the human need for connection, however transactional, that transcends centuries. So yes, the Lupanar is a bit awkward, a bit raw, but it's also profoundly, undeniably human. Because if there's one thing the ashes of Vesuvius couldn't hide, it's this. History isn't just made by emperors and generals. Sometimes it's written in graffiti above a stone bed in a tiny room with terrible lighting by people just trying to get through the day. The real scandal of Pompeii isn't what happened in the brothel. It's how honestly it reminds us that beneath the togas and the temples, people have always been people. Forget everything you know about secret societies and hidden treasure. The real story of the Knights Templar is far more brutal, more shocking, and more relevant than any Hollywood fantasy. This isn't a tale of shadowy rituals. It's a story of faith, finance, and a king so desperate for cash, he orchestrated the world's first corporate takeover by torture. Imagine a brotherhood of warrior monks, sworn to poverty, yet richer than kings, devoted to God, yet answerable to no one. For nearly 200 years, they were untouchable. Then, in a single morning, they vanished. This is the epic true story of history's most powerful order and the betrayal that brought them down. Our story begins not in a cathedral, but on a dusty, blood-soaked road. The year is 1119. Jerusalem is back in Christian hands, thanks to the First Crusade. But for the thousands of pilgrims streaming into the Holy Land, the journey is a death sentence. The road from Jaffa to Jerusalem is a gauntlet of bandits, raiders, and desperate men who see these weary travelers not as pilgrims, but as walking in Nizeh. They're robbed, beaten, and left for dead. The dream of touching the sacred stones of Christ's tomb ends in a ditch miles from salvation. The rulers of Jerusalem are helpless. Their armies are stretched thin. Something new is needed, something radical. Enter Hugh de Payens, a French knight with a vision as sharp as his sword. He gathers 8 other knightsmen who've seen enough war, enough death. They take a vow: poverty, chastity, obedience. But unlike monks who pray in cloisters, these men will take their prayers onto the road. They will be monks with swords. Their mission? Simple: protect the pilgrims, fight so others can pray. They call themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The world will know them as the Knights Templar. At first, they're a joke. 9 guys against an army of thieves. But they have something no one else does: absolute, terrifying conviction. They start small, 9 knights patrolling the highways. No castles, no banners, just faith and steel. But their reputation grows. They don't fight for land or glory. They fight to the death. When their banner, the Beauseant, flies, they cannot retreat, ever. This isn't bravery. It's a death wish wrapped in piety. Word spreads. Pilgrims breathe easier. Bandits think twice. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem is impressed. He gives them headquarters on the Temple Mount, the holiest ground in Judaism and Christianity, believed to be the site of Solomon's temple. It's a PR masterstroke. These aren't just knights. They're holy warriors, living where God once dwelled. But a handful of men can't guard an entire kingdom. They need structure. They need legitimacy. Enter Bernard of Clairvaux, the most powerful monk in Europe. He's a reformer, a mystic, a man who makes popes nervous. When Hugh de Payens presents the Templar mission to him, Bernard doesn't see a ragtag militia. He sees the future. He writes a fiery manifesto in praise of the new knighthood. Traditional knights, he says, fight for vanity. Templars fight for Christ. Their battlefield is their monastery. Their sword? An instrument of prayer. Killing isn't murder. It's malicide, the destruction of evil itself. Under Bernard's guidance, the Templars get their rule, a strict code of monastic life, silence, simple food, no personal wealth. Their cloaks? Plain white, symbolizing purity. Their symbol? A simple red cross. Bernard's endorsement is a game changer. The Pope blesses them. Kings across Europe take notice. What began as 9 desperate men becomes an official papal-sanctioned army of God. With papal approval, the floodgates open. Nobles across Europe, eager for salvation and a tax write-off, donate land, money, and their second sons to the cause. The Templars' poverty becomes a cosmic joke. Individually, a knight owns nothing, not even the horse he rides. But collectively, they become the richest organization on earth. They build fortresses that defy siege engines, crack day chevaliers, saved Tortosa, impregnable stone giants that still dominate the landscape today. But their genius isn't just in war, it's in finance. A pilgrim in London wants to visit Jerusalem, carrying gold across bandit-infested Europe. Suicide. So he deposits his money at the local Templar preceptory. He gets a coded letter of credit. He travels to Jerusalem, presents the letter, and withdraws his cash. It's the world's first international banking network. King's Notice. England's Henry III uses the Templar headquarters in Paris, the Temple, as his personal treasury. Popes use them to move funds for wars and bribes. The Templars become indispensable. They're monks, yes, but monks who can marshal armies, build castles, and move money across continents. Their power is absolute, and absolute power? It breeds absolute envy. Their battlefield reputation is legendary. At the Battle of Montgisard in 1177, 500 Templars help a vastly outnumbered Christian force crush Saladin's army. The Sultan himself calls them the most dangerous of his enemy's men, who fight to the last breath. At the disastrous Battle of Hattin in 1187, they're annihilated. Captured Templars are executed en masse on Saladin's orders. It's a massacre that scars the order, but they don't break. They regroup. When Richard the Lionheart arrives for the Third Crusade, it's the Templars fighting beside him. Their red cross is a beacon of defiance. Yet their greatest enemy isn't Saladin. It's time. The 13th century is a slow death knell. One by one, their castles in the Holy Land fall. Acre, their last stronghold, is lost in 1291. Thousands die. The survivors retreat to Cyprus. The mission, the very reason for their existence, is gone. Jerusalem is lost. Pilgrims no longer need escorts. So, what are they now? A vast, wealthy, militarily powerful organization with no purpose. And no one to answer to but the Pope. To kings drowning in debt, they're not holy warriors. They're a bank vault with a red cross on it. Whispers start. Maybe they're corrupt. Maybe they've abandoned God. Maybe they worship something else. The perfect storm is brewing, and at its eye is Philip IV, King of France. Philip the Fair, a name dripping with irony. He's bankrupt, and he owes the Templars a fortune. Friday, October 13th, 1307. Dawn hasn't even broken. Across France, royal officers kick down doors. Hundreds of Templars are dragged from their beds in a single coordinated strike. The charges? Heresy, blasphemy, idol worship, sodomy, secret rituals where they spit on the cross. It's a laundry list of medieval nightmare fuel. The evidence? Non-existent. The motive? Crystal clear. Philip needs money. The Templars have it. He can't tax them. He can't touch them. So he destroys them. The arrested knights are thrown into dungeons. The torture begins. The rack, the strappado, burning feet. Under unimaginable agony, they confess. Yes, they spat on the cross. Yes, they worshipped a mysterious head. Yes, they were heretics. The confessions are paraded as proof. Never mind that many later recant, declaring their innocence before God. Philip doesn't care. He needs a papal bull to make it official. Pope Clement V, weak and under Philip's thumb, hesitates, but the king's pressure is relentless. In 1312, at the Council of Vienne, Clement officially dissolves the Knights Templar. Their lands? Supposedly given to their rivals, the Hospitallers. In reality, much of it flows straight into Philip's coffers. The order is erased, but the story isn't over. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Maillet, is burned at the stake in Paris in 1314. As the flames consume him, he issues a curse. Pope Clement, King Philip, I summon you to God's judgment within the year. The crowd gasps. Within months, both men are dead. The curse becomes legend. The Templars are gone. But in their ashes, 1,000 myths are born. Did some escape? Did they take their treasure? Did they go underground? The truth is simpler and far more brutal. They were victims of the first state-sponsored smear campaign. A lesson that even the most powerful can fall. When a king needs their gold,